I wasn't the brightest bulb in the box. I got this recorder, and as I was first checking it out, I noticed that the volume control knob was slightly bent. So I thought, I'll bend it back. Took the knob off the shaft, got a pair of pliers to bend it back straight. And the little knob piece sheared right off the pot. So I'm going to replace the pot with this one. Thankfully, it also happens to be a 10 kiloohms and have the same size shaft. I just realized this pot has a switch on it to turn on a voice activation feature. That feature is going to be lost for the time being until I can order a pot that's of the same small size that also has an on-off switch built on it. In the meantime, it's just going to be playback volume. To turn on voice activation, I have to turn the switch off. Because if the volume is all the way down and it clicks into position, that turns the switch off, which would turn on voice activation. So to disable voice activation, I act like this switch is always on. So therefore this brown wire here, which used to connect to this post, which would be turned whenever it would be closed, would connect over to here, I soldered right over here to the black wire. So voice activation would be permanently turned off. Then once I order a pot that has a switch on it, I can later replace this one with the proper type. But in the meantime, I'll use this type. Voice activation isn't a feature I'd be using much anyway. I went on to eBay and I ordered a new potentiometer. I broke the old one in vain, trying to bend back what I thought was the bent shaft, only to find that shaft wasn't bent. It was just the way the knob was on. Even this new one with the straight shaft, when I put the knob on, it looks really crooked. It must have not been put on the shaft properly. I feel like an idiot for doing such a destructive act, but at least I have been able to order another pot on eBay that is the right size shaft, right resistance, and even has the switch, so I should be able to use the voice activation feature as well. And do you see, I have this recorder apart a lot more than you'd expect, because this had a most bizarre problem. It was a short circuit across the power supply, specifically the power supply for external input. If you put this tip positive, this gives out 8 volts. Tip positive, this has a negative ground. Power into this jack right here. The idea is you'd be able to power the machine off the external supply and you'd be able to charge the batteries. Across the battery terminals itself there wasn't any short circuit. But across the main power in here, I'm going to put power on here and I'd go into play mode, there was a dead short. I mean 0 ohms, full on short. If I put it into rewind, it would run the motor, but put it into play, dead short. I found this short and it was actually something miswired. I suspect, and some of the soldering joints looked questionable, I suspect that some previous owner had this machine apart trying to fix something in the past and had put the wire back into the wrong spot. This red wire had been hooked up to the terminal that had this other red wire on it. It was causing a dead short across the power supply when in play mode. Thankfully this red wire is simply ground, so I found a lug over here on this little terminal block that goes to ground, and that solved the short problem. Now I have to get this back together. I already took pictures on where all the wires go so I can solder the circuit board all back on, but I'll take some more footage. Another thing I noticed is that the gear drive had a really hard time turning and the motor could barely turn anything. Well, it turns out the flywheel needs lots of lubrication. You can see right now it's turning freely, but it's held on with this plate, and the lubrication inside that hole and on the top of the flywheel there on that bearing was really bad. It looks like there's a little ball bearing, unless that's a piece of capstan. I don't want to lose that. and it was all gummed up with age and having a hard time turning. I was thinking it was the worm gear drive here, but no. The worm gear drive is fine. It doesn't take much effort at all to turn the worm, to turn this gear nicely. So that's not the problem. Plus, I already lubricated that too. I just dropped some oil inside. There's a little hole on the other side, right here, where you can drop in some oil. So that wasn't the problem there. So I'm going to clean that up, and I should be able to have the transport running smoothly after that. With the short circuit fixed, then it will just be waiting on the new potentiometer to have a full feature and hopefully a non-crooked looking knob. But I'm also wanting to show what the circuit board looks like, because it's a neat looking old vintage circuit board. I don't know how the capacitors are. I haven't ran the amplifier at all because of the short. It's a very nice looking circuit board with some more classic vintage Sony transistors. Look at those beauties. Very nice indeed. Plenty of transistors on this board. There's lots of small germanium silver ones as well as those black nice looking ones. And then there, of course, prominently is the bias oscillator coil. Right there. Very nice to see. AC bias, as I expected. It also turns out that this has two different size capstan sleeves, so it actually is a 3-speed tape recorder, which is not what I was expecting on a little 3-incher. Apparently this machine will even be able to run at 7.5 inches per second. We got the machine open over here. It's making a lot of noise, and I noticed something. We don't want to lose these tiny little plastic things. There's 3 of them on here, and I just showed the 4th one earlier. My goodness. That goes under this. It's a weird back tensioning thing. Actually, not back tensioning, it's more like keeping the supplier wheel from turning too quickly, mind you, in the same direction as the tape. Here's the unit. I soldered the circuit board, the amplifier back up. I energized it, and I was pleased to see the motor came to life. Actually, you probably knew that already because I discussed this weird thing. I put WD-40 inside this, and now there's a weird kind of a buzzing like, grinding like, annoying sound problem has been fixed by that. This is 100% gear drive, no belts and no rubber idler wheels, aside from the pinch roller, if you want to consider that one. So I put it back together. The transport is running nicely. Goes into play mode just fine. It goes into rewind mode just fine. And this is speaking strictly from the transport standpoint. Amplifier wise, completely dead. I could hear a slight buzzing noise out of the speaker, which let me know the speaker is still good. But there's completely zero amplification on the amplifier. Well, it's a nice thing having an ESR meter, because I went ahead and checked the electrolytic capacitors on the app. I put a blue mark on the ones that were bad. Every single capacitor bad. This one in the bottom left corner had a little bit of admittance of current flow, but was quite leaky. All the other capacitors I checked on here, not even the slightest deflection on the meter, full on leaky, 100% leaky. That would explain why the amplifier wasn't amplifying at all.
And there is a little person to see the sign, so she do not go in the door.
I've fixed the rotary switch. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter if I put an inductor in series or capacitors to ground or anything like that. I can't get rid of the stupid motor buzz noise. But I'm going to lubricate the controller. And while I have this open, I want to show the incredibly interesting little speaker. I want to give a shout out to Speaker Freak 95. This is a very interesting little speaker that's inside the Sony TC-905A. If you look closely at the cone, you'll notice that the cone has ridges just like a spider. And it's clear. Below it you can also see the actual spider. Looks like they used a clear kind of spider. It's not plastic, but a clear kind of spider along with the regular spider. The clear one's the cone, and the electrical connections are all along these little metal pieces here to make the speaker of this tape recorder. A most odd speaker design for sure. Plus you can see the actual spider is below the frame of the speaker. It's a very interesting speaker that is used in this particular tape recorder. I thought I'd show that extremely interesting speaker while I had this part here taken off. Companion to the Sony TC-905A reel-to-reel tape recorder, which is running now, but with some crappy rechargeable batteries inside. It is running. So the batteries need to be charged. You see how it's just doing that? You see the meter? It just goes down. Now, of course, this is awaiting a new pot with switch. That's still coming in the mail. But next, I have not restored yet the Sony SSA905A, which is the external amp / charging device. You can see it says Sony Matic, and that's because the tape recorder itself is automatic level control. This machine sends out 8 volts DC, no problem. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the voltage went down a bit under load, but it sends out 8 volts DC, tip positive, and ring negative. But and then the amplifier input's right here. But obviously this machine, this little amplifier, I get absolutely no audio output out of this. It's obviously going to need to be recapped, or at least have some capacitors replaced, probably all of them, because I know on this machine I literally went in and I replaced every single electrolytic this thing had to offer. Every single electrolytic on the circuit board was bad. One of them admitted a little bit of a reading on the meter, on the ESR meter. All the other electrolytics, not even a slight deflection of the meter. Completely leaking. I also replaced a couple of other capacitors. I even tried adding an inductor in series with the motor, as well as capacitors across between the motor connection and ground, but unfortunately I just cannot seem to get rid of the stupid motor buzzing interference noise coming into the amp, which is extremely annoying. The SSA905A has been opened up. Again, remember, don't get the models confused. The recorder is the TC-905A. This is the SSA905A. It's got an 8 ohm, wattage unknown, oval speaker, which I'm sure Speaker Freak would appreciate. It has a really nice large Alnico magnet on there. Very pleased to see that. This is before recapping, of course, so it's got the old original capacitors. What was interesting is when I first looked at the board, I'm like, there's only one transistor on there. But there's got to be a push-pull output. And I thought maybe they're under this. No, they're over here. Here are the push-pull output transistors, wired separately over on this heatsink here. You can see the two black metal cases of the transistors for the output. Very neat indeed. I really like those painted black metal can transistors used on the Sony devices. I think they're very aesthetic. Nicely, the transformer is fully labeled. This was obviously for American export, not Japanese. As you can see, it's 117 volts. Outputs are 5.8 volts and 5.8 volts. Interesting that it would be 5.8 volts as opposed to 6 volts. 160 milliamps. So you get what, 11.6 volts across the entirety of the winding, or 5.8 volts on one side, 5.8 volts on the other. And also you can see it's got a selenium rectifier with both sides facing the diodes of the selenium rectifier and then the center coming out for a full wave rectification and 5.8 volt power. I suspect the filter capacitor is somewhat good because the voltage coming out, scratch that, peak voltage obviously, with full wave rectification. I still don't know how good this capacitor is going to be, but they're probably all going to get replaced. Here's the other side of the circuit board before I put it back. I went ahead and recapped. You can see what the unit looks like on the other side. And this little soldered area right here is what goes to this ground wire here, which I believe just goes to the chassis. Here is a unit recapped. You can see the capacitors right there. Pretty neat looking to see it with the new capacitors. Some of these you could say are new old stock, but this shiny one here is actually from the 80s. This one too, but they tested good on the ESR meter, so they should be good capacitors. Thought I'd make a short little clip before I installed it. I had ordered a new pot, and the pot came in the mail. So it has a switch on there, so we're putting this little potentiometer inside the recorder, and we should be good with this unit. You've finally reached the feature presentation. This is your host, Ricky Klein, the Cassette Master again, here to present to you, in action, a very special reel-to-reel tape recorder, the Sony TC-905A reel-to-reel tape recorder with the Sony SSA-905A battery charger / power supply / amplifier module. I hope you enjoy this presentation. Welcome, listeners. This is the Sony TC-905A reel-to-reel tape recorder. And this is a very interesting unit. You notice a number of things about this unit. Now, at first glance, you say, oh, this is one of the small, this is a 3-inch recorder, a rather compact 3.5-inch reel-to-reel tape recorder. But some things may be striking whenever you notice them. For one, it has built-in rechargeable batteries. Amongst the striking things, of course, is the fact that this unit also has an external power supply, battery charger, and amplifier combination. Now, the power supply or amplifier battery charger external device, the SSA-905A, only is powered by the AC line, and unfortunately cannot have built-in batteries of its own. So if you want to use the external power amplifier, you have to plug it in. But If you want to make on-the-go recordings, you can still play back the recordings through the built-in monitor speaker, which is a very interesting little speaker, as you would have seen earlier in the opened up part of the video. Some other interesting things about this recorder is an interesting feature called the voice command or voice activation. I've just activated this machine with my voice. Notice how the motor had just started and you hear the sound go like that. Took a pause and then started speaking again. Now I'm speaking again. A feature commonly seen on microcassette recorders, this voice activation feature will start and stop the machine automatically whenever you speak. Once the silent portion is reached, the machine will stop. You can of course disable the voice activation feature by turning the volume knob away from click position. This is an automatic level control machine. No manual level control provision. It has an electrical pause called instant stop, and the advertising for this machine claims that this is a 2-speed recorder with 3 3/4 and 1 7/8. Actually, that was the front page of the service manual that told me that. I don't have the service manual, but I saw a picture of the front page of one on the internet, and it said 3 3/4 and 1 7/8. Well, this recorder does have 3 3/4 and 1 7/8 inches per second. But the thing is this, there are 2 different capstan sleeves for this recorder. Before I continue on, let's go ahead and change the speed to 1 7/8. Because currently we're at 3 3/4. You'll notice this notice here. Before detaching and using the 905A for the first time, do not fail to charge the batteries. You might notice this like crack here in the paper. That happened minutes ago because of how evil I am. Let's just say I didn't remember to put the capstan sleeve on there, and I started to rewind, and I started to close the door, and like all idiots, that resulted in the paper getting caught on the reel. I learned my lesson a hard way, as usual. So you'll notice this capstan here. It's a really big diameter. Cute, nice capstan, isn't it? So let's put the other capstan sleeve on. This will make it run at 1 7/8 inches per second. And store the other capstan sleeve up here. And head cover. Okay, the unit is now running at 1 7/8 inches per second by changing your capstan sleeve. Now you'll notice something interesting. Most of the time you have a 2-speed recorder that has a capstan sleeve. You take the capstan sleeve off, it runs at the lower speed, for instance 1 7/8, and you put the capstan sleeve on, you get 3 3/4. This recorder actually has 2 different size capstan sleeves. A fat capstan sleeve for 3 3/4 and a thinner capstan sleeve for 1 7/8. And it was only advertised as being a 2-speed tape recorder, but in reality it's a 3-speed reel-to-reel tape recorder, which has 3 3/4, 1 7/8, but if you don't have either capstan sleeve on, you get 15/16 inches per second. Now, obviously the audio quality at 15/16 is pretty poor, but it is still possible to make intelligible speech recordings at 15/16 inches per second. Therefore, this recorder could be used as a long play recorder. Now, there's only one storage post for the capstan sleeve, so if you want to run it at 15/16 inches per second, you'd want to store that extra capstan sleeve in a safe place where you'll know where to find it so you don't lose it. I don't want to run the machine while it's upside down, otherwise it starts spilling out tape out of the supply reel. Here you can see the bottom tape recorder TC-905A rechargeable nickel cadmium batteries. Right now I've got nickel metal hydride cells loaded in it. But anyway, it's very neat that this is actually a 3-speed tape recorder. So right now we're running this at 1 7/8. Oh my gosh. Where the squeaking is going to get worse and worse as time goes on. It is not good. Anyway, 1.78 inches per second. And of course this recorder is AC biased, and the equalization on this is obviously going to be optimized for the faster speed, and it does not change the equalization when you change the speed, unfortunately, since it is just a capstan sleeve type unit. But anyway, this recorder, some other interesting tidbits about it isn't just the fact that it's a 3-speed portable, even going down to 15-16 inches per second, or the rechargeable batteries, or the voice activation feature. But what stands out to be most about this recorder is the design of the mechanics. Most recorders have a belt drive system. This recorder, now most recorders have a belt drive system, and some recorders are idler drive, which is also very common to have rubber idler wheels. This recorder is gear drive. All gear drive. The motor feeds a worm gear, which feeds a drive gear, which that drive gear then turns the capstan flywheel. And also the transport mechanism, aside from being able to rotate spinning wheels, the only moving part aside from rotation is the pinch roller. When you go between forward and rewind, you're simply reversing the motor direction. And of course, when you're in rewind, you're not regulating motor speed with the governor, but you're reversing direction, and the way the mechanics are designed, automatically the transport mechanism does its intended thing based on the sizing of the gears, clutch mechanisms, and so forth. It's a very fascinating and interesting design. This isn't the only Sony recorder to have used that design. There's another real Sony recorder that exists out there, the Sony TC-901, which you can find on the internet. An extremely rare, late 50s vintage, Japan only, I believe, Sony reel-to-reel, 3.5-inch capstan drive reel-to-reel tape recorder that also used gear drive. Extremely rare machine, although probably not quite as rare as another late 50s vintage Sony portable tape recorder called the Baby Quarter, which used a proprietary cartridge. Now that's so rare that the hen might need to be going to visit the dentist. Now I don't like the squeaking. The squeaking is a new development for me. Don't confuse that squeaking with the squeaking you may have heard of me raising the camera on my tripod. It's bothersome. But anyway, aside from that, I did already have to do a whole lot of work to this machine to restore it. I had to replace every single electrolytic capacitor it had to offer in both the tape recorder and the external amplifier. The amplifier of the tape recorder itself, every single cap on there was full-on leaking. One of them emitted a little bit of current flow in the ESR meter, but all the others on the amplifier board and the recorder were so leaky they didn't even make the meter move a tiny bit. It's full-on leaky. I also added inductors in series with the motor and capacitors across the motor windings to ground, or across the connections of the motor, to try, for Pete's sake. The big capacitors still tested alright, although one of them slightly leaky. To get rid of the stupid motor, electrical motor interference noise that you can clearly hear in this recording. And for the life of me, I cannot get rid of that freaking motor noise. The motor is running fine, but I just can't for the life of me get rid of that freaking noise, and it's really irritating. That's the only big problem I'm having with this recorder. Another thing I want to mention, I forgot to mention in the recording, was the ALC stopped working. Not permanently, sometimes it would work, but the ALC would become kind of intermittent. And I found that it was a failing diode. Actually, it was a transistor that was being used as a germanium diode. Voltage drop was around 0.2 volts, 0.19 something, or 0.189 or something on the original. Replacement, I also found a germanium transistor that had been used in the diode in the past, whose voltage drop was about 0.20 volts. So I used that as a replacement for this here, which was the culprit for failing ALC circuit, or automatic level control circuit. And then when the ALC fails, the level gets stuck at max and the recordings are all ridiculously overdriven. Now, after doing lots of work, replacing all the capacitors, cleaning the back of the flywheel where it had old gumped up lubrication, making it really hard to rotate, lubricating that, lubricating the other side of the capstan bearing, lubricating the pinch roller. These are the original rechargeable batteries that were in the unit. 3 of them are able to retain a charge apparently. One of them is not able to retain a charge for long. I haven't really tried much with testing them under load. I tried once on this recorder and it didn't come on, but I think it was because these batteries weren't making good contact in the battery holder. Lubricated the worm gear drive too. I don't know if it needed it or not, but I lubricated that. The little commutator thing that takes motion from the motor shaft and uses it to turn the worm gear drive, the little rubber sleeve thing, I had to put a dab of hot glue in there to make it hold on good again. And what else did I do to this recorder? I had to replace the pot. Of course, you would have seen all this earlier on because I thought the stupid knob was bent when I first got it, so I, like any other smart individual, take the knob off and bend it back into position. Right, wrong. Shear the knob right off the original pot. That's what I did because how stupid I am. Trying to bend it back, it just breaks off. So I had a temporary pot that didn't have the clicking switch inside it installed. And now I have a pot in here that I ordered on eBay that has a clicking switch. And now the voice activation can work and the knob doesn't look so crooked. But it still looks just as crooked as it was when I first got it. It's still slightly crooked. Which just shows me all the more it wasn't the freaking bent knob, it's just the way it was. And that makes me so mad because I could have moved into that and I didn't. I was an idiot and I have a regretful decision, but it's not that bad. I already have it replaced now. So, and then another biggest thing I had to do with this machine was not the capacitors, was not the lubrication, was not the pot. The biggest yet thing I had to tackle on this recorder was the rotary switch for going between stop, forward, and rewind, which of course turns the motor on and off, changes the polarity of the motor, or also changes which winding gets activated, or which connection, because one of the connections is through the governor switch, and one of them is direct. And direct is using rewind, governor switch is using play and record. And it also, of course, turns the amplifier on and off. So anyway, that one of the little contact pieces inside that rotary switch broke off. I had to take the switch out, disassemble the rotary switch itself, very, very carefully put that little contact piece back into place and super glue it back in place. And not only that, when I first got this, I would put a power supply, not the amplifier module, but an external power supply across the jack for the power input on the bottom. And when I went to play position, I noticed a dead short. And I thought, oh, that's not good. So in my troubleshooting, I found that it was just shorting out those specific inputs. It wasn't shorting out the battery terminals, but it would short out those the power input whenever it was in play. Not when it was stopped, not when it was rewind, but when it was in play, it would short them out. So I moved that wire to ground, fixed that problem, only to find that the amplifier module wouldn't amplify. Only to find that I had to hook the wire back up the way it was where it would short it out, because it was this weird design where it's supposed to short it out in play mode, and by shorting out the power, specifically using the amplifier module uses that short to turn the amplifier inside on, which is a very strange design. But now it's all working. Before I stop, let's switch the speed to 15/16 inches per second and get some really bad audio quality. Now we simply take the capstan sleeve off altogether, leaving the smaller diameter capstan, which is not even intended to be used directly by the user, but is kind of what I like to call a hidden feature. Oh, okay. Now
I'm recording at the very full speed of 15-16 inches per second on this recorder. I believe I know what the squeaking is. There was one more problem that I had to fix on this recorder, which was whenever I finally got the transport to actually run, there was this horribly loud, just squeaking like crazy noise. And there's this weird little clutch mechanism-like thing on the back of the supply wheel side that I opened up and cleaned it WD-40 and then put back together, and the squeaking problem went away. I think it's that thing starting to squeak again, but not nearly as bad as it was when I first ran it. So when I first ran it, it was squeaking all the time, like just constant. Okay, this recording audio, obviously the audio quality is extremely poor, because for one thing, it's very slow. It wasn't intended to run at this machine by people using it, run at this speed by people using it. And it was, the equalization is obviously not optimized for 15-16 inches per second. But this recorder is capable of running at 15-16. I'm now going to use a telephone earpiece as a microphone, which has a more limited bass response, to see if we can get a little bit clearer sound out of the recording. Using the voice command, I use the voice command to start this. I'm speaking into the earpiece of a vintage telephone handset. There's a microphone here. Just because the bass response is less on it, although the S's are going to sound distorted. But you might be able to hear a little bit more clear speech, more intelligible speech out of this recording at 15-16 inches per second. The time is 7:31 p.m. The date is the 23rd of August, 2018 AD on the Gregorian calendar. I hope you enjoyed this recording on the Sony TC-905A reel-to-reel tape recorder. There was also an earlier version of this, which was the Sony TC-901. Excuse me, wrong one. There was an earlier version, the Sony TC-905, without the A at the end, which did not contain a built-in speaker, and also I don't think it had the voice activation feature, according to a website called NiMH. A fantastic Japanese website with many interesting reel-to-reel portables, including this model, and including the Sony TC-901, an earlier, not late 50s gear-driven unit that I mentioned earlier.
Obviously, 15-16 sounds pretty atrocious. 1 7/8 sounds alright for speech, and 3 3/4 sounds quite good, aside from the incredibly loud, incredibly obnoxious, incredibly ridiculous motor electrical noise, which I cannot get rid of. At least from what I've tried. Of course, if anyone has any more, if anyone's an expert on the subject and knows how to get rid of the motor noise, again, I put inductors in series, I put capacitors from the winding to ground. I cannot get, and I'm talking 0.1 microfarad here, I cannot get rid of this stupid noise. Well, next, of course, we will be showing musical recording quality. Now look at this. You notice the reel's spitting out tape. So try that again. And you do that again. The reel is still spitting out tape. Now what do you think is going on here? Let's take the reels off. You notice something bizarre. Put it into rewind. Both reels are turning, one at a faster speed and one at a slower speed. The clutch mechanism normally used in playback is still engaged because, remember, as I said, the gears of the transport mechanism do not change their position. They move, rotate that is, but they do not shift. They don't shift around like idlers. they stay in position. Simply the fact that this runs a lot faster than this, and this is a clutch mechanism, means you can still rewind it. But being that this reel uses a very, very thin diameter, much thinner diameter hub than your typical 3-inch reel size, which is this diameter, I don't believe it was designed to use a diameter this thin, and therefore this isn't running quite fast enough to make up for the speed of the take-up reel's reverse spinning direction when rewinding. I also want to mention another recorder out there, the Phonotrix small 3-inch reel-to-reel tape recorder, which runs best with 3-inch reels that use hubs that are bigger than this standard 3-inch size hub to make up for a slower turning take-up speed and relative to the capstan speed. Anyway, those are some interesting little tidbits on some recorders. Obviously, when these machines are designed with speeds like that, especially a gear-driven machine like this, there has to be lots of calculations with the hubs and the velocities and everything. And obviously this smaller diameter on this Italian reel here, which is not the standard diameter like this one, was not accounted for in the design. And then again, you don't commonly find reels with that smaller hub anyway. Most 3-inch reels have this size hub, and some 3.5-inch reels have an even bigger hub. So that's reasonable. I like using this reel because it has 0.5 mil tape on it, and 0.5 mil tape wound on a 3.5-inch reel can get up to about 30 minutes of recording time per side at 3 3/4, which means at 1 7/8 that's an hour per side. Or in this machine, if you want to run it at that 15/16 IPS speed, there's 2 hours per side of very low audio quality recordings, but at least still intelligible
Tape recorder.
So now I will record over that stuff and do musical demonstrations. Of course, not my own music. It's going to be some music off of YouTube used to show how the machine records music, and I will do it at the 3 speeds. I hope you enjoy. Sorry for this long, incredibly long length of this video. Music playback. Magma by Astral Sounds. You can notice a strange fast flutter, which I believe is a result of a gear drive system. The other horrible speed random fluctuations are probably due to the squeaking problem. Oh, now 1 7/8. Yeah, let's just say this machine, although working rather well now, is never going to be perfect. This is Spectra by Astral Sounds. 15/16 inches per second now. Oh, this is Omni by Astral Sounds. And now I'll return it back to the speed I'm typically using this unit at, 1 7/8. A compromise between 3 3/4 to conserve recording time, but obviously not 15/16 because the sound quality is so bad and I don't want to end up losing one of the capstan sleeves. Because that would be the most atrocious, most horrendous, most undesired crime. It has been returned to its resting position. This presentation isn't quite over because I just want to kind of take the machine off, show a bit more of the built-in speaker, and I want to show the voice activation feature actually operating. That's a weird, did you see that? The tape just moves as I take it out. It's a weird little tidbit about this thing. But anyway, there's a recorder. Very aesthetically pleasing, to say the least. Very neat looking machine. The underside is metal. You can take that screw out, take the bottom, put the batteries in there. Actually, aside from the real cover here, this hinged door, everything else of this recorder but this hinged door is solid metal. The case, solid metal. Solid metal. Very solidly made. And this knob, when you turn it, it's extremely solid. So solid, as a matter of fact, that on more than one occasion I've had to retighten that set screw because it would come loose. I put some grease in there today to try to help and make it move a little bit easier, hopefully. And here's the amplifier module / battery charger. Puts out 8-volt DC across the bigger terminals, tip positive, ring negative. Amplifier input is here. But whenever you turn the amplifier on, though, you have to short these two terminals, which I know is remarkably strange, but I'll show you. Normally that gives out power to charge the batteries, and the current limiting circuitry is inside the tape recorder. But this must have something in it too, because whenever I short this out, it turns on the amp. And that's why it was shorting out the power input on the machine when in play position. That's why this recorder explicitly says for connecting TC-905A only. Because I thought, oh yeah, well the user isn't going to know much better now, is he? But this DCN, once I saw that was 8 volts, I thought I could put in 8 volts, tip positive there, no problem. Then I put it into play mode, and thankfully my power supply had current limiting on it. because it puts a dead short on there because that's turning the amplifier on. It's just very strange, yet thinking outside the box, ingenious design. Line output works as a regular line out. Matter of fact, this line output, which is a smaller size jack, is, if you want to hook this up to an external device, better audio quality is gotten from the line out than is gotten from the monitor out. Believe me, much better sound quality, much better bass response out of the line out. Just playing it out of the built-in speaker, of course. But let's go ahead and hook this back up to this module because this has two charging modes on it. Now the batteries are currently charged, so I don't know what the current running through them with fresh or with dead batteries that need to be charged is. But there are two charging modes, normal and quick. Normal, at least currently with the currently charged batteries, just to trickle charge them, I measured 8 milliamps of charging current in normal mode, and in quick mode, which turns on the little incandescent lamp, it's putting about 54, 53, 54, thereabouts milliamps through the batteries. So if you want to give it a trickle charge, just leave it in normal position, and you should be able to leave the machine on, just plugged in all the time, and it should, the trickle charge, the current is low enough that it should not overcharge the batteries, especially it wouldn't overcharge the amp hour rating of the new batteries. The batteries in here right now are 2500 milliamp hours or 2.5 amp hours, whereas these original cells were, it says it on here, believe me, 425 milliamp hours or 0.425 amp hours. But anyway, 8 milliamps trickle charge should be fine. And the idea with the trickle charge is to do a full charge on trickle from a dead battery would take a long time, but if you keep it on here, you would and it will keep the battery from that self-discharge that happens when the battery is left unused. So if you want it in a ready-to-go state, you keep it on the docking station, and then you can take the recorder off and take it on the go. And if you need faster charging, you can put it into quick charge, which I don't know what the exact timing, I guess you could do the calculations, but the quick charge here is putting about 54 milliamps charging current in the batteries. But obviously I wouldn't want to leave it on quick charge because that's more than the trickle charge current, and that could potentially overcharge the batteries if left unattended for too long. So normally you'd just want to leave it in the normal position. So that's the charging, and the thing is with the charging is it'll not charge when playing. Notice the light turned on. Once you go back to stop, it goes back into charge mode. So that's an interesting thing there. So I'll also show the voice activation in operation. Another thing I want to show you is that not only does this have a carry handle, but also on the bottom it has stowage for the cord. Fortunately the Sony nameplate's missing. Storage for the cord, which has numerous cord marks on the inside, as you can see. But also has this screw here, which screws this, which has a spring inside, and that's to screw into the recorder itself to hold this bottom piece against the recorder, so you can have it like one little complete little portable unit. But of course, since this can't contain its own batteries, you can't have it 100% portable with the docking station. If you want it 100% portable, you have to have the recorder by itself, which thankfully has a monitoring speaker. So I could show voice activation in operation, provided it will even work. When I first tried voice activation, it would not work. Then I tried voice activation later, and it randomly started working. So don't be surprised if it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore. Just told you. I don't know if it's a voltage thing because it started working when I had it on the docking station, but that's part of the woes of this recorder, because once I fix one problem, there's always got to be some other problem that seems to show it to manifest itself. Fix that problem and another one manifests itself. This recorder has had, I've opened this thing up numerous times. Voice activation won't even work anymore. Can't show that cool feature off anymore because it doesn't work. I can record alright, testing 1, 2, 3, blah blah blah, but I can't voice activate it anymore. I don't know why. I don't know why, but
I don't know. Voice activation won't even work anymore. Can't show that cool picture off anymore. Can record alright, testing 1, 2, 3, blah blah blah, but I can't voice activate it anymore. I don't know why. I don't know why, but
now it's going into not doing anything mode, which it does sometimes. I don't know if it's short mode or what's going on with this thing, but it's, I don't know what's going on with this thing, but it's just I don't know why it's going into off mode. I'm hoping it's not going into battery short mode, which sometimes it does, depending on the position of the wire inside. I've already logged enough time on this camera. File size is probably way too big. I don't know what it takes to make the voice activation feature come to life. But at that time it worked earlier, it was just it was randomly decided to work, and now of course it doesn't work anymore, and that was all a surprise.
at that time it worked earlier, it was randomly decided to work, and now of course it doesn't work anymore, and that was all a surprise.
Flaming go off. And I guarantee the problem with the voice activation is not the contacts on this switch, because because of voice activation, the hot switch has to actually be in off position to activate the voice activation, but the voice activation doesn't work anymore. So it's a shame. Was that the first time I tried it? The last time I tried it, and somewhere in between it managed to work. Well, this is silhouetted cassette master. I gotta go to bed. Hope you enjoyed this video. With a no longer voice commanding, squeaking Sony TC-905A. Squeaking is not the problem I thought it was originally. It's something with the take-up prelamps. I'm afraid. Sick and tired of removing that circuit board and unsoldering those connections for the umpteenth time. Gee whiz, I need the air conditioner on. Hope you enjoyed this atrociously long video. This is after shooting the video presentation. Tired of that squeaking, so I decided to open this thing up to mitigate the problem. And I thought, you know, Clyde's sight and his love for seeing the mechanisms of these machines, I'm going to show him the actual mechanism. The reel actually comes out on the front side. You have to, well, first you have to take off the stuff on the back, then you can pull it out on the front. Here's the post coming from it. Here's the gear, the take-up gear. And this middle part is the clutch mechanism. And you can see this little middle spring in there that pushes up on there, and that's what gives the just tiny amount of friction for the clutch. And then this part goes over the clutch and catches on the two little catches there. Oh crap! There it is. Little ring. Don't want to lose that little ring that went on top. And catches on there. And then it's got a not perfectly circular shape, but it's got that little notch there, so that will hold it in place for the clutch. Neat design.